when you do support and go to a small local business like this, they're really trying to, I guess, bring you produce and products that are local as well.
Another week kicks off on Dirty Linen. Another week of chatting to people in the world of hospitality about all things front of mind and swirling around. I kind of feel like we're in a bit of a new stage of these crazy COVID times with another wave coming through. Cost of living, cost of everything impacting people in all kinds of different ways. Things do feel a little bit difficult for a lot of people. We're going to talk about everything that's going on in the mind of Leigh Boin today. Leigh is the owner of a Melbourne wine bar called Hudsons Road, and I'm really grateful to have you on the podcast today, Leigh. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Dani. Great to be on here.
Tell us a little bit about your wine bar.
Yeah, it's just coming up to almost 5 years now, which is pretty amazing, I think. Just fairly typical little suburban wine bar, I suppose, but also a independent bottle shop and small deli in Spotswood, just over the Westgate there. And yeah, it's a small little 20-seater inside. And something that I started almost 5 years ago now, and have a fun time being there with all the locals of Spotswood and the immediate surrounds, I guess.
I guess a lot of those inner west suburbs have had something of a renaissance over, I'm certainly the last 15 years, 10 years, 5 years. I mean, they're all, there's lots of interesting stuff happening. Tell us a bit about Spotswood, what drew you to open somewhere there, and what's the community like?
Yeah, the community is fantastic. I live in Newport, so it's just down the road, and was in Yarraville for a little bit prior to that. I've always, aside from some time spent living in Sydney, have always, been more this side of town. I grew up in Lara and Geelong. When coming back from Sydney, always thought of settling, back on this side with young children and grandparents, stretching sort of from Geelong to Ballarat. It was always this side of town that it needed to be. So when the thought came to open something, which has sort of been there my whole life, I suppose, lots of hospitality experience when I was younger, like a lot of people, but it stuck around for, beyond the early 20s, I guess. But then, after a period of being out of the business, the idea of having something never went away. So, wanted to open something and looked, in the immediate area. I think with anything like this, it always pays to be open something locally to you when you're local, and also with, the hospitality hours, not having to drive across town after work is a bonus. So looked around and at the time thought Spotswood was perfect, probably 6-7 years ago. Some areas closer, perhaps like Newport, weren't quite ready, I didn't think. But then the other areas like Yarraville and Seddon and whatnot did have plenty. So definitely thought there was a gap in Spotswood.
And what do you reckon are the important ingredients for a neighbourhood wine bar, bottle shop, deli like yours? What is it about? Do you sort of perceive what you think the community wants, or is it about sort of stretching them in a certain direction? What do you think? Yeah, how do you go about putting a neighbourhood place like that together?
I think it's exactly both things that you said. You're definitely being relatable and understanding what people in an area like that want, but then there is, the aspect of stretching it too. And the area, I mean, we've seen it changing. I certainly I have more pet nats in the fridge now than when we opened. There wasn't one then. So as an area changes, the need for those sorts of things and people's appetite, I guess, or they're more willing to try something like that. And in a North wine bar could quite easily have probably 3 orange wines on by the glass at the moment. But, still in an area like ours, it's not something that people gravitate towards straight away. So, knowing when to push the boundaries a little bit for customers, but, also knowing that, that you need to have what they're comfortable with, and what they perceive as local, I think is important too. You know, I'll certainly have, and it's got to do with my background, you'll find a lot more Geelong region wines at Hudsons Road than you would Mornington, and that's because people this side of town, I think, you know, consider that to be a local wine compared to the other side.
That's so interesting. It's that real sense of micro regions and the sense, I mean, you know, like let's say North Carlton or whatever, it's only 10K away, but the fact that people's tastes in drinking wine would be so different, I find that's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to put your finger on sometimes, but I think it's definitely there.
Yeah, really interesting. And Leigh, what do you reckon about my little intro and just feeling like there's something of the feeling of a new phase in this, you know, this history that we're living? What do you reckon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to. Sorry, I'm a bit croaky. I finally got struck down after all this time and had to have 10 days isolation. Just came out on Thursday.
Well, there you go. It's all part of it. Hey, there's a lot of people being struck down either for the first time or again at the moment. I
know. I thought maybe I was, you know, one of these superhuman people that had a fantastic immunity, but it's not the case, and maybe I paid for it and seemed to get a triple dose. But it's really hard to remember what normal is, I guess, too. And, you know, you sit there and count back the lockdowns. You know, I think I refer to, you know, Melbourne's first lockdown, but it's actually the second one, you know, the major one that we had in over winter in 2020. And, you know, there's coming out of that was such a crazy time for a hospitality business, and it really boomed after that, and it was fantastic. And then we had some little lockdowns, and then I guess our second major one through winter last year. And, you know, it's hard to put a handle on exactly, you know, how things were before it all, but, you know, my sense tells me that it hasn't bounced back the same after that one, like the end of 2020. And now, there's just so much, you know, there's still so many cases around. I feel a lot of people, and different areas might be different, but I feel a lot of people in suburban areas might, you know, are getting out more on the weekends still to the regions, or to, you know, to visit family or friends in Colac, and just these sort of things. You know, people's habits have changed. We, I guess, took for granted for so long being able to go visit friends, and you cancel on your friends regionally, you know, in a couple of days prior to going to see them. But I feel people aren't doing that now, and they're taking advantage more of going out and visiting everyone, you know, because we were locked up for so long.
That's really interesting. And so what sort of impacts have you noticed recently on your own business? I suppose the most obvious one is that you weren't able to be there for at least 10 days.
Yeah. I mean, that was a huge struggle. Anyone in small business and not just hospitality would understand that when you have a place yourself, you know, so much of your staff hours and time is yourself. So, I'm really lucky to have such a fantastic team. So to have 10 days out, you know, everyone sort of stepped up, and luckily no one else, you know, it didn't spread within the bar or anything like that. So no, none of the other staff had it at the same time. There's only been one other staff member prior, and that was sort of through the start of this year period. But, so everyone was there. We only had to close one day. A few other days opened a bit later, but, you know, with that came really high staff hours, of course, because I wasn't there. So, you know, that's a huge challenge in a small business. Other things at the moment now, as I was saying, I don't know many people around necessarily on what you used to consider you could always bank on busy Fridays and busy Saturdays, but at the moment it seems to be like it's one or the other potentially. And even things, I think you see, you know, like bookings of 4, for instance, so often become 3 at the moment, last minute, because, you know, 4 friends are catching up, someone's got COVID. So, you know, that extra, even though the booking goes from 4 to 3, you're not filling that seat with someone else. They're on the same table. So, you know, you're not necessarily getting to capacity all the time because of things like this. You know, cases are still so high and apparently rising.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And, I mean, what about the cost side of things? I mean, I've heard people talk about difficulties getting wine, onto shelves, you know, for various reasons, or that the cost of things are going up. Like, how are you finding that side of things?
Yeah. There's not an aspect, there's not a product in the business that isn't going up. And I have, I guess, the retail side of things too. So there's a lot of the, the small selection of deli and providore style things. But, everything there's, whenever a wine that you stock, whenever a vintage rolls over, it's going up. I don't think there's been an example recently of that not happening. And it's the things you don't, as a small business, I don't have, a cost analysis team or anything like that I imagine big businesses might have. But, you miss a lot of things. It's just, it's the death of a thousand cuts sometimes. The $6 in the last two orders for the box of Who Gives a Crap toilet paper. It's such a tiny amount per use, I guess, per square of oil roll of paper. The $50 a month electricity bill that's gone up. It's only a couple of dollars a day, but it's just all these tiny little things. There's an extra delivery fee for a couple of boxes of wine or beer, or instead of that, maybe the supplier has said it's minimum 3 cases instead of 2 now to get your free delivery. So while that hasn't gone up, you've got more stock sitting around at any time. So to avoid the rising costs, so there's just sort of no way to escape it, and it can be hard to always pass it on. You have to, and I think most people do understand that. But when everything's going up, and sometimes you feel people might not be going out as much because their costs are rising, it can be hard to counterintuitive to put prices up if you're quieter as well.
Well, and I guess also, you mentioned the 4 might drop to a 3, but then presumably that 3 might not have the next bottle of wine, or they might have a cheaper wine, or they might not have that deli plate.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, everyone's, cutting costs in their own way, and it's not always obvious. I think when they're sitting there, but to sit there and analyse the group spills, I'm sure they would be down more now than a similar point to last year. Well, similar point to last year, we probably weren't open, so I don't know. Or we were open I was very lucky being a bottle shop, and with the retail side of things, that business model did work through the lockdowns, which was amazing, and especially the major one last year, there was some real fantastic support through the licensed hospitality grants and that sort of thing. So, they're a lot luckier than a lot of businesses who aren't around.
So Leigh, in this context where things are pretty tricky and pretty tough, you did reach out to me to chat about something that just didn't feel quite right in this context. Do you want to talk about what it is?
Yeah, no, thank you. I got in touch. There was I'm sure a lot of people saw it. There was Aldi did a what do they call it? The Aldi showroom or something. They did a pop-up wine bar in Sydney this weekend, actually. I think it's for 2 nights. Last night and tonight, and there was just, I guess their PR team did a fantastic job there. There was blanket coverage across so many outlets, and I totally understand that. But for me, there were just a couple, I guess, of media outlets, for prominent food magazine and hospitality sort of online press that, for me, I sort of it didn't sit right that they were providing, just that unquestionable sort of blanket press, giving something like this airtime. Ironically, I reached out to you, and here we are giving it some airtime, of course. But don't put this on. It really didn't sit right. The story was, there's 83-cent glasses of wine and less than $1 serves of cheese at this little pop-up silly wine bar. And
I've looked it up. So it's Aldi Unpacked, and it's called the Trophy Room, and it's actually the weekend of the 15th and 16th of July in Sydney CBD. Not that we're trying to give them a shout out at all, but basically it's like, to get in, the ticket to get in is $4.41, and that represents the cost of a glass of one of Aldi's most prized wines and an equally awarded accompanying cheese platter. So I suppose it's so interesting because it's like, someone can spend just $4.41 for a whole night out, and it's gimmicky and it's a one-off, and I suppose it's just showcasing their products and, you know, the price point that they're able to operate at. But, I mean, what is it about this that... Is it the fact that it happens? Is it the fact that it got attention? Is it the fact that Aldi, with all of its buying might and, you know, international clout, is able to offer this? I mean, what is it about it that that rubs you the wrong way, Leigh?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% a total gimmick, and, you know, whatever they're doing that night, whatever premises they're hiring for the pop-up and the staff that are going to do it and all that sort of stuff, there's no way that it doesn't run at a loss and they don't lose money from it. But that's not an issue for the might of Aldi. It's, you know, on a micro level, you know, those 2 nights, you know, there's some small venues that are nearby that probably won't be as busy as they usually are. Those 2 nights, if some of their customers have seen this hilarious sort of concept and buy a ticket for a laugh to, you know, be on Instagram there and do that sort of thing. So, you know, for small venues, being quieter that weekend, you know, isn't helpful. It's only one weekend, but it does mean so much to small businesses. But then it's and for what else are you doing? They're not doing it to make money. That's for that night. It's the promotion of their really cheap products that, you know, a lot of people in the industry would know doesn't help anyone, even the winemakers that they're buying all that wine off, you know, and selling for however much a bottle in the shop. It's generally regarded as okay quality stuff, but you know, it doesn't really help anyone in the industry, I don't think. Like something people who go that night might also go, actually, that wine wasn't too bad. I've never had it before. I went for a laugh, but you know, it's not too bad. So, you know, for my Tuesday night bottle, bugger it, I'll grab an Aldi one instead of going to my local indie bottle-o. You know, we all know the cheeses and things like that at these sort of stores can be pretty good. But again, you know, it's like cheap milk at the supermarkets. You know, the people they're buying it off aren't really benefiting that much. And you know, and again, you know, people will realise that they can get some good quality product there, and you know, anyone, even if a couple of people just stop going to their local deli, it's not a win for them, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's this conversation that we've been having so much on the podcast and that I've written about in, you know, other forms of journalism. It's this whole idea of value, and, you know, it's about offering value, showing value, and people seeing the value in those experiences, which, yeah, perhaps are not the cheapest, but that there are other benefits to spending that money, whether it's, you know, the fact that everyone's being paid properly along the supply chain, or it's about, you know, that you've got these vibrant, independent offerings in your own neighbourhood, or that are there in a small town, let's say, that you're visiting. So I mean, that's the challenge, isn't it? It's to keep offering that value in an environment when, as you say, like it's trickier and trickier because of, you know, these creeping costs.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I guess that's ultimately what rankled me the most. There were just a couple of outlets that I would have thought really knew better and usually do promote these sorts of, you know, fantastic small venues and understand the supply chain problems and costs, you know, better than most. But, you know, at the very same time, just, I don't know, fell for this PR genius by Aldi, hook, line and sinker, which, you know, at the time of seeing it, you know, for me just sat wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it from both sides, because as a journalist, I just think, well, if someone's doing something, yes, it's gimmicky. You sort of feel, you could feel just like you notice that you're being sucked in by it, but at the same time, is it notable? Like, would people want to know about it? Like, maybe, I don't know. I have a bit of sympathy for the media outlet receiving that press release and wondering what to do with it. But yeah, I totally see it from your point of view. Like, imagine if that was down the road, and this is in Sydney, you're in Melbourne, but yeah, you can imagine this happening in other cities around the country.
Absolutely. I mean, I imagine that's the plan, and a whole, extra few rounds of press will probably come out of it. There's the Brisbane one will be next, and then the Melbourne one, and who knows. So, and it's pure clickbait, absolutely, as well. I saw it through a Facebook post originally, and I commented within that post too. So I am seeing notifications, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's the most popular, they've got the highest reach and interaction of their post for the last month sort of thing. So it's worked on that regard.
It's doing the job.
Doing the job, absolutely.
And I noticed on their page where they talk about it, they say they've done a recent price report, and in that they talk about consumers are not only worried about the affordability of groceries, that was 51% of people who had that concern, but also food and takeaways and alcohol. Many Australians said they've already cut back spending in these categories, with almost half, 44%, reducing their spend on restaurants and takeaways, and almost a quarter, 22%, on alcohol in the past year. So I suppose, they're identifying the same things that you have, but they're obviously responding to those cutbacks in a very different way. But I mean, Leigh, have you got anything that you're able to do in your business that other people might find useful? Like, have you thought of any ways of, I don't know, whether it's clever ways to keep costs down or to increase spend or to encourage more people to come in? How are you responding to the current climate?
No. I mean, I feel I do need to sit down and think about that again, and I guess coming into as we get out of winter, a couple of ideas maybe to change up. I'm even doing a few just little things within the venue, some new decor. After 5 years in the venue, it's good to refresh these things without doing a full makeover. But other than that, no. I mean, for me personally, there's a lot of fatigue about new ideas and pivoting and that sort of thing after having to do it for a couple of years through the process of staying open, especially into the major lockdown of last year. There was just so much vying for people's attention online about what the latest new takeaway pack is or something like that. So there was it was exhausting just trying to think of new things all the time, to keep, I guess, people interested and their attention. When people were stuck within their 5 kilometres too, everyone wanted to find something new to do every weekend on their walk or something like that. So there's a lot of fatigue in that regard. So I so hear that, and I'm hearing that from a lot of people where you just want all that pivoting to be in the past. But as you said at the top of the chat, it's hard to remember what normal is. Yeah, exactly right. You can deep dive into your point of sale figures and that sort of stuff to try to get an idea. But at the same time too, then the business was only 2.5 years old. So at that period, it's it was a period of growing anyway, which is fantastic. So hard to compare now to then. I mean, there's certainly a lot of. Another thing I think is the regional movement. A lot of that we know about. A lot of people from the suburbs and Melbourne have moved regionally. So there's I think a lot of it's fantastic for the regions. There's so many openings of little venues like this that you wouldn't have seen 5 years ago as well in the regions. But you realise then too after a while. You haven't seen some of your regulars for a while. It might have been 6 months or something. And so, they've moved out. That's right. So, there's you are competing against the regions in a way which is a strange concept.
Yeah, that is interesting. Especially coming from the regions yourself, you're really tuned into that. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think if I grew up in Geelong now, I probably wouldn't leave. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot happening there, definitely. I mean, Leigh, you offer something to your community. What would you say to people who are wondering, like, what's so special about great local independent venues?
I think just remember that they are, most of the time they're a local as well. We've all seen the memes about it, but, when you do support and go to a small local business like this, their kids are going to the same school as yours. That business is, providing vouchers to the local football or netball or cricket club. Just all those little things, just never forget that. Most of the time, they're part of the exact same community as you, and they're really trying to, I guess, bring you produce and products that are local as well where possible. So, understand that everything's going up. As much as everyone complains about the price of fuel, that's why that bottle costs a couple of dollars more now, or the cheese does. Just little things like that. It's hard to remember and easy to forget when you're fighting your own family budget as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Leigh, let's talk about something that's really positive. Tell me about maybe a Geelong area winery or a particular wine that you're loving that you reckon I should look out for when I come down to Hudsons Road.
Yeah, I do stock a lot. There's we've just had a new release of all the by far wines, but they need no introduction. The winemaker there won Gourmet Traveller Winemaker of the Year, I think 2 years ago. So, that's just an absolute, world renowned sort of wines from the region there, which I've always known the area can produce, which is just fantastic. Some of the smaller ones, Burn Vineyard is really good, Byrne. We're absolutely loving their stuff at the moment. Their Pinot and Chardonnay are pouring as we speak, but just really, really fantastic stuff. And that producer sources grapes from different areas in the Geelong and immediate sort of surrounding areas, but then makes it the exact same way. As so we might have Pinot from two different areas, but makes the wine the same way. So the difference that you're tasting is really the region and the terroir of that. So it's just fantastic to see producers, really, really showcasing an area like that. I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the fact that it's just that little bit further west than you are, and that you're sort of wrapping your arms around that region. I really love the specificity of it. Leigh, it's really, really great to have a chat to you. Really feel all that stuff that's swirling around for you at the moment, and I know it's going to resonate with a lot of other small business owners and people, working in the suburbs and looking after their community, but also, needing to sustain a business in amongst that same community. So thanks so much for laying it out for us today so articulately, and wish you all the best in your wine bar.
Awesome, Dani. Thank you so much. I really love the show. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Thank you. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.